Reborn into this life, I deliberately avoided every possible encounter with my husband. He urged me to become a housewife after graduation, but I secretly applied for graduate school. When he decided to support his first love with household funds, I quietly transferred the money away. He said the wedding was all prepared for us to marry, but I chose to run away instead. In my past life, he swapped the babies when his first love and I gave birth at the same time. My child died young, while I raised his first love's child to become successful. In old age, they pushed me off a cliff to reunite, killing me. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the year I graduated. Happy graduation. My hands were suddenly filled with pots, pans, and kitchenware. I was so stunned that everything clattered to the floor. The woman in front of me instantly turned pale. Su Jing, what are you doing? I went through so much trouble to pick out these kitchen supplies for you. They're specifically designed for women. Shen Xingxuan's mother kept yelling at me, her criticism relentless. Meanwhile, I was still overwhelmed with the sheer joy of having been reborn. Doing a quick count, I realized today was the final day to register for the postgraduate entrance exam. 1. Are you even listening to me? How could someone like you possibly take good care of my son? The moment Shen Xingxuan was mentioned, the image of his tall, straight-backed figure instantly came to mind. In my past life, I always considered it my great fortune to have been able to win his heart. He was exceptionally good-looking, ranked at the top of his class academically, made it to the provincial basketball team thanks to his passion for the sport, and had a gift for songwriting. Every melody he composed seemed to resonate with people. He now wants to become a doctor and was immediately taken under the wing of a senior professor in the medical field, becoming their last apprentice. Everyone envies me for being engaged to him and for having his affection. Only I know that he's a selfish and despicable person. Thinking about what he did in his past life, I couldn't help but clench my fists, forcing a smile while suppressing my disgust. You head back first. I've got something to take care of. I immediately bolted toward the internet cafe at the school gate, ignoring her calls. My roommate was stunned to see me frantically opening the graduate school application system and asked if I wasn't going to be a housewife after all. I just smiled in response. This is the golden age of reform and opening up. How could I let myself be tied down by domestic trivialities? Pursuing postgraduate studies to serve my country, that's what I'm meant to do. Perhaps surprised by how quickly I'd changed, my roommate's eyes lit up with genuine admiration. After filling it out, I breathed a sigh of relief and finally headed back to campus. In my past life, I heeded Shen Xingxuan's advice and became a housewife after graduation, using the substantial inheritance left by my deceased parents. With me taking care of everything at home, he was free from any worries. He went straight into a hospital internship after graduation and quickly climbed the career ladder under the mentorship of a senior professor. He was transferred to a hospital in the city, and his first love, He Si-Hui, followed him there. Meanwhile, I was left behind in the village. The next time we met was when I was giving birth. I was in the same hospital room as his first love, both of us in labor. Watching him bustle around taking care of her, all I wanted was a sip of water. But he impatiently told me to pour it myself. Heartbroken, I resolved to devote myself entirely to raising my child once they were born. I watched my child grow from babbling with the most adorable smile. As my child grew older, they became increasingly impatient with me, not even bothering to visit during the holidays. I thought they were just too busy. It wasn't until I turned 65, during the new year, that I discovered my son, and He Si-Hui had been living together all along. My son even called another woman mom. I confronted them right then and there, but my son shot up, shielding them, and shoved me back forcefully. Mom, wouldn't it be better for you to just stay in the village and enjoy your retirement? Why did you have to come out during the new year and ruin our family reunion? I don't want people to know I have a mother who knows nothing and acts like some country bumpkin. Behind me, Shen Xingxuan didn't even glance my way as he comforted He Si-Hui, who I had frightened to tears. He looked at me coldly and said, "Let's get a divorce." I refused to get divorced. How could this be fair? I poured my entire life's efforts into the Shen family. I was the one who cared for his parents when they fell ill, while he was off traveling and enjoying himself. I raised our son entirely on my own, without any help, and he grew up to be a fine man. It wasn't until he turned 18 that father and son even had a real conversation. Now my son says I don't understand anything, like some country bumpkin. I made a scene demanding justice, and even the neighbors were drawn by my shouting. Finally, they reluctantly gave in. Later, the four of us went hiking together. The three of them conspired to push me off the cliff. I clung desperately to my son's leg, refusing to let go. I begged him to save me for the sake of our years of mother-son bond. To my shock, he looked at me with utter disgust and angrily revealed the truth. You were never my real mother to begin with. The daughter you gave birth to died at birth, and my biological mother was too frail to care for a child. That's how I ended up becoming yours. If I had a choice, I would never have wanted you to raise me. At that moment, all the strength drained from my body, so all my life, I've just been paving the way for someone else's happiness. I suddenly regretted why I gave up my career to become a housewife, too. In the end, my son kicked me off the cliff without a second thought. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the year I graduated. As soon as I returned to school, I saw Shen Xingxuan's mother frowning and muttering angrily. Shen Xingxuan didn't argue back, just remained silent. He Sihui was also there, gently patting Shen's mother's back to comfort her before looking up and noticing me. Look, sister-in-law is back. I'm sure she didn't mean to upset you. As she spoke, she reached for my hand with a gentle tone. Hurry up and apologize to Aunt Shen. I sidestepped to avoid her hand. Shen Xingxuan looked puzzled by this. What's wrong with you? Mother Shen's face darkened further. Stop wasting words on her. As she spoke, she pulled 2 red envelopes from her pocket with a beaming smile, one for Shen Xingxuan, and one for He Sihui. The three of them held hands like a family, completely treating me as an outsider. He Sihui glanced up at me, seemingly afraid. Not even a sister-in-law. Mother Shen snorted coldly, while Shen Xingxuan pulled out a wad of cash from his pocket. She doesn't need this money, but you do. It's tough for a young woman to make ends meet. Take this money. I was going to stay out of it, but seeing that, I rushed forward to snatch it back. Shen Xingxuan, how dare you give my money to your first love right in front of me? Did you even ask me? Shen Xingxuan looked displeased and didn't let me get it. You have so much money. I was just taking a little bit of it. She's just a young girl who lost both parents. It's not easy for her to live alone. How could you bear not helping? I was so infuriated by his words that I laughed. She's an orphan, and I'm not. Just because the Shen family is broke, they can take my subsidy and give it to someone else. He Sihui's eyes welled up with tears from the scare I gave her. Please don't argue because of me, brother and sister-in-law. If she doesn't want to give me the money, I'll just do without it. With that, she covered her face and ran off into the distance. Shen Xingxuan immediately chased after her. After some back and forth tugging right in front of me, He Sihui finally accepted the money. I was so anxious to follow them, but Mother Shen held my hand tightly to stop me. Our family has no place for a woman with such a narrow-minded outlook like you. I struggled in vain, and in the end, Shen Xingxuan had to pull us apart. He looked at me, his eyes filled with cold indifference. Su Jing, I'm deeply disappointed in you. Then he shook his head, as if giving in. If you don't want it, I won't offer it anymore. I knew they wouldn't be willing to let go of their walking wallet. Me. After they left, I immediately went to the bank to handle some business. He knows all my bank card passwords. After checking my balance, I realized several large withdrawals were made for unclear reasons. This isn't the first time Shen Xingxuan has done this. I immediately changed the password. I then went back to school to see my teacher. I owe her a great debt of gratitude for recognizing my potential. Her guidance was instrumental in my winning multiple awards at school. Her face lit up when she learned I was planning to pursue graduate studies, and she asked if I'd like to accompany her to Jiangsu University of Science and Technology to conduct mechanical research under her own mentor. Perfect timing. We'll be setting off next month. The teacher is willing to teach for free. My eyes lit up. This is exactly my dream school. I eagerly agreed, and during the break on my way home, I started looking into train tickets for next month. The price is quite reasonable for me. I clasped my hands tightly over my chest. I would finally be free. It was already late when I got home. This apartment isn't very big, but every detail, inside and out, has been decorated exactly to Shen Xingxuan's taste. Now that we're going our separate ways, I can't help but feel a pang about the money spent. With that thought, I immediately unpacked my bundle to gather the valuables and take them to sell at an outside shop. While packing, I came across the scarf I had embroidered for Shen Xingxuan. I've always preferred handling larger items. This kind of delicate work isn't my strong suit, and I pricked my fingers over and over again. He saw it once and bluntly said it was hideous, but upon closer inspection now, the embroidery is clearly well crafted. I sighed and put it away carefully, planning to use it when winter comes. After selling everything and returning home, I noticed the apartment felt much emptier. I figured I'd clear this place out right before leaving for good. 3. Not a single one was left for Shen Xingxuan. He didn't come back until very late. When I saw him, his cheeks were flushed, and he seemed a bit tipsy. I was a bit late because I was having dinner with them, he began to explain. Good thing I knew better than to make a portion for him. But he carried a strong scent of magnolia perfume, even more overpowering than when I smelled it earlier in the day. They must have been sitting very close to each other. He seemed to notice and immediately took off his coat. She fell, and I helped her all the way. Don't overthink it. Surprisingly, he didn't make a fuss about it. After all, I've seen this kind of trick many times. See Hui, he always shows up whenever Xingxu and Shen and I are alone together, conveniently injured. Xingxu and Shen would just say he's a doctor and can't turn a blind eye to someone in need. It always ends with me watching him carry Si Hui away in his arms, my heart-wrenching sobs failing to earn even a single glance back. Anyone with eyes can see there's something off about the two of them, only I was the fool, taking a whole lifetime to see things clearly. I didn't respond, but instead went back to my room, took out the book the teacher had given me, and prepared to study. Just as I was about to sit down, I heard the door open. Shen Xingxuan walked in without knocking, as if he owned the place. I scrambled to my feet and frantically gathered my things. I don't want to tell him about my plans to take the postgraduate entrance exam. He didn't seem to notice anything unusual and said to me, "My mother has picked an auspicious date for the wedding. It's set for the first day of next month." He wasn't asking for my opinion, he was telling me. The first day of next month happens to be when my teacher and I are leaving together. Perfect timing. I'd been wondering how he'd react if I called off the wedding right in front of him. I gave a quiet ahm to show I agreed. He took it in stride and continued speaking. "I brought over the pots and pans Mom gave you." As he spoke, he walked over and gently took my hand. "I know you're not much of a cook, but that's okay. How about we cook together from now on?" There was a tenderness in his eyes I'd rarely seen before. He made me the same promise in our past life, but after we got married, everything changed. He'd often skip meals at home claiming he was too busy, and Shen's parents scolded me for my terrible cooking, saying I lacked any semblance of domestic grace. He took the news calmly, simply advising me to study more while at home and not to upset the elders. It was only later that I found out he often cooked and did chores outside. He took such good care of Si Hui that even in old age, her hands remained soft and fair. Fighting back my disgust, I kept holding on and lowered my head, feigning shyness. He didn't leave until he'd said his piece. Exhausted, I slumped into the chair and let out a long sigh. Everyone thought I'd hit the jackpot by marrying Shen Xingxuan, a poor orphan with no one to rely on. That's why at our wedding in my past life, everyone flocked around Shen Xingxuan, and even when they spoke to me, it was just to tell me to behave. My grades in school were clearly no worse than his, yet the only recognition I got was being known as the woman who married Shen Xingxuan. In this lifetime, I refuse to be defined by such a label. I will live for myself. The day before, I had sold off everything of value in the house. Shen Xingxuan rarely came home and paid little attention to the apartment, so he never noticed anything missing. He left all the wedding planning to his mother, except for this one day when he asked me to meet him at the bridal shop. When I arrived at the shop, I saw Shen Xingxuan waiting outside. As I stepped forward, the curtain before me was drawn aside. It was Si Hui. She was wearing a strapless gown, beaming with a smile. "Xingyun, what do you think of this one?" Shen Xingxuan immediately explained upon seeing me. "Si Hui just wanted to help by trying on the wedding dress for you. Don't take it the wrong way. As an engineering major, you probably don't have the same eye for design as she does." But Si Hui had put on a full face of makeup and styled her hair, hardly looking like she was just trying it on for me. Seeing me stay silent, Si Hui looked on the verge of tears. Shen Xingxuan casually picked up a gown and handed it to me. It was a mermaid dress, the style I detest the most. I tried to refuse, but he forcibly pushed me into the fitting room. "Be a dear." Si Hui tried this on and it looked absolutely stunning on her, but I'm more athletic than her, so this doesn't fit me at all. Even the sales assistant stepped out to offer fetching another size for me, yet Shen Xingxuan stopped them and came straight in. I was so startled that I immediately covered myself. Even if we were married in a past life, we're completely innocent in this one, but he didn't seem to think it was a big deal. "What's there to be shy about? You'll see it eventually anyway. Let's see if this dress really won't fit." With that, he strode behind me and yanked it upward with force. I took a deep breath, feeling so constricted I could barely breathe, nearly crying out in pain. I can't breathe. A sharp pain suddenly shot through from behind. A chill ran down my spine. The store clerk gasped upon entering. It's blood. Are you out of your minds? Why does she insist on wearing it when it doesn't even fit her? In my past life, I took care of their whole family diligently without shedding a tear. I didn't cry when I realized they were the ones who were truly family. I didn't cry when they pushed me off the cliff. Now she's sobbing uncontrollably because her skin got scratched while struggling to fit into the wedding dress. He-Si-Hui, drawn by our movements, pretended to offer help. She didn't close the curtain. But the pain was so intense that I couldn't care less about saving face. With the clerk's assistance, I shakily took it off right in front of them and changed back into my own clothes. Shen Xingxuan seemed to finally have a pang of conscience. He practically dragged me into a cab and took me to the hospital to get bandaged up. I couldn't stop the tears, but deep down, I felt strangely calm. Even the doctor was startled when he saw me. He carefully cleaned my wounds and took the chance to scold Shen Xingxuan for being such a terrible boyfriend. He hung his head in silence, seemingly consumed by guilt. In the end, Shen Xingxuan held my hand and said quietly, "I'm sorry, I just thought this one looked nice and insisted you wear it. Tomorrow I'll definitely get you a larger one." Alright, even now, he only made a single concession. Still insisting I wear that dreadful dress, I quietly dried my tears and spoke softly. Shen Xingxuan suddenly looked up after hearing my words, a radiant smile spreading across his face. "Perfect. I knew you wouldn't make a fuss about these things. Of course it's fine. After all, I don't even care about this wedding. Tomorrow, the more chaotic, the better." But that sliver of guilt vanished the moment he saw He-Si-Hui upon returning home. She was crouched by my doorstep, sobbing as she spoke. "My landlord kicked me out, and I can't access the money you gave me." Yet Shen Xingxuan's first instinct was to look straight at me. "Did you change the bank password?" My heart sank, and a series of suspicions began to form in my mind. Shen Xingxuan shook off my supporting hand and confronted me. "Why didn't you tell me you changed the password? Si-Hui is waiting for that money to rent an apartment, soon enough. What does her rental situation have to do with me? That was my parents' money they left for me." I was absolutely furious. I can't believe Shen Xingxuan actually used my money to rent an apartment for He-Si-Hui. 5. No wonder even though I budgeted carefully in my past life, I couldn't withdraw large sums of money in my old age. Looks like that's how I bit the dust in my past life too. The whole family bled that card dry. He-Si-Hui leaned against the wall and slowly rose to her feet, gazing at me with timid hesitation. "What kind of nonsense is that? Isn't your money just Xingxuan's money? He only helped me out of pity. And he always did it in your name. What's the point of that pretense?" I walked over and stopped right in front of her. "This has nothing to do with me. You stole my money. Pay me back." He-Si-Hui burst into even louder sobs. How could I possibly come up with that kind of money?" Between sobs, she stumbled into Shen Xingxuan's arms. I was about to lose my temper when the neighbor stuck his head out, grumbling and cursing. "If you want to argue, do it at home." Shen Xingxuan, not wanting to lose face, quickly agreed and immediately ushered us inside. After closing the door, he held He-Si-Hui and comforted her for a long time, then, ignoring my objections, forced He-Si-Hui to stay in my room. I sat in silence in the living room for a long time. He came out and sat beside me. "Why is your room so empty?" I raised an eyebrow, surprised he'd finally noticed, and simply lied. "Nothing much. Just tidied up a bit. I was just thinking about borrowing your clothes for Si-Hui earlier, but never got to it." "No wonder. Good thing I already finished cleaning up." I stood up to get the bedding to sleep in the living room. He grabbed my hand. "Since we're getting married, it's fine to sleep together." "It's not fine with me." He choked up and let out a sigh. "Si-Hui's had a tough time too. I'll have her leave tomorrow." "Alright, we're all adults here. Let's not make a big deal out of it. Then use your own money to help her. What's the idea of taking mine? If you know she's struggling, then help her pay me back." I turned my palm upward and looked at him. Shen Xingxuan instantly flew into a rage out of humiliation. "You're absolutely unreasonable." With that, he stormed back to his room. I was glad for the peace and quiet, so I laid out a mattress and slept on the living room floor. The thought of seeing Shen Xingxuan in a sorry state tomorrow made me happy. At 5 a.m., we all got up. Si-Hui, with an air of atonement, eagerly took on the role of bridesmaid, bustling around to help with the preparations. but her hairstyle and makeup were completely out of sync with mine. Looking at her more extravagant dress and more polished makeup than mine, anyone who didn't know better would have thought she was the bride. Mrs. Shen preferred to keep things simple, so both Shen Xingxuan and I set out from this apartment. But right before we left, Shen Xingxuan looked grim and grabbed my hand to ask. I gave a quiet why did you secretly sign up for the postgraduate entrance exam? I was taken aback and could only force myself to stay calm. Are you sure you're not mistaken? Shen Xingxuan pulled out his phone, opened the message, and showed it to me. Isn't this you, Su Jing? Wasn't this exactly why you suddenly ran out to find an internet cafe on graduation day? Shen Xingxuan's grip on my hand hurt, and I couldn't help but struggle. So what if I am? Who are you to tell me where I can go? You're not going. He Sihui quickly stepped in to break it up. Come on, not on such a happy day, sis. Honestly, if you want to take the grad school exam, just go for it. Why keep it from Xingxuan? Besides, didn't you promise to take good care of him after graduation? Why go back on your word? I glanced at her sideways, my tone detached. If you're so willing to take care of it, then you do it. He Sihui started crying again after I snapped at her, clinging tightly to Shen Xingxuan's hand. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked up at Shen Xingxuan with hopeful anticipation. Shen Xingxuan didn't even glance at her, his gaze still fixed on me. No worries, we'll go together when the time comes. We're husband and wife, of course we'll stick together through thick and thin. He suddenly calmed down, turned and took my hand. The moment she stepped outside, her radiant smile returned. He Sihui, holding up her skirt, had intended to ask to sit next to Shen Xingxuan, but he shooed her away. Get in the next car. He Sihui pouted. Didn't we agree on this? Shen Xingxuan's tone was icy. Don't waste time. He Sihui didn't dare argue with Shen Xingxuan. After getting out of the car, she shot me an angry look before reluctantly boarding the vehicle behind us. I closed the back door and went straight to the passenger seat, through the rearview mirror. I saw Shen Xingxuan clenching his fists tightly. That's how he always acts when he's anxious or nervous. I suddenly felt like laughing. Shen Xingxuan, what's making you so uneasy? 6. When we arrived at the venue, Shen Xingxuan held my hand as we walked in. As we passed by Shen's mother, I overheard her discontent. This makeup and styling are completely inappropriate. She knew today was the wedding yet still acted so thoughtlessly. He Sihui, sitting beside her, was being extra cautious. Auntie. It's not sister's fault, I'm the one who messed up, Mrs. Shen immediately changed her tune. How could it be your fault? She's just not pretty enough. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Shen Xingxuan suddenly spoke up, his hand tightening around mine. You're the most beautiful. When I looked up, I saw him turning his head to gaze at me. That doesn't sound like a lie. I'm past the point of wanting to hear it. The remark was just loud enough to reach He Sihui's ears. She snorted, shooting a resentful glare at my back. Finally, I stood before the officiant with him. I felt a bit nervous. The thought of ruining everything in front of Shen Xingxuan, who always cared so much about his pride, made me strangely delighted. The officiant proceeded with the ceremony. When it was my turn, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do not. The moment the words were spoken, the entire room erupted in gasps. Shen Xingxuan's eyes held disbelief, as if something inside him had shattered. You misspoke, didn't you? No, I didn't. I smiled at him, then snatched the microphone from the host. The bride today is someone else. As soon as the words were spoken, the video I had prepared started playing. The screen showed Shen Xingxuan and He Sihui in various intimate moments. Everyone knows Shen Xingxuan treats me well. He's widely considered the perfect husband material. I pulled the utterly stunned He Sihui onto the stage. Look. Everyone, her dress is more lavish than mine, her makeup more exquisite. If she's not the bride, then who is? The guests in the audience immediately began whispering among themselves. Oh my god, who wouldn't see that? TSK, who would have thought Shen Xingxuan is still tangled up with his first love? The video happened to show the exact moment they were kissing in the classroom. Suggestive sounds echoed through the venue. Shen's mother shouted in a panic, turn it off, now. No one listened to her. Seizing the moment of everyone's stunned silence, I kicked off my high heels and bolted outside. Shen Xingxuan snapped out of it and tried to chase after me, but was stopped by security. 7. It's no use. The planner Mrs. Shen hired happens to be an old friend of my father's. They reached out to me after realizing who I was, so everything today was made possible with her help. Shen Xingxuan is no match for me. After leaving the banquet hall, I immediately got into the car they had arranged and left. A new beginning. I'm here. In my past life, Shen Xingxuan's rigid discipline made me overly compliant and emotionally numb. Even when I won major engineering awards in college, he still saw them as nothing special. What's the point of a girl like me studying engineering? I'll never find a job anyway, not like He Si Hui, who studies design with such an eye for aesthetics. She works quickly and produces excellent results. She's everything a girl is supposed to be, so I went through phases of insecurity and sensitivity, tried learning design myself, only to end up being laughed at. I even gave up on my strengths in tech and engineering. Thank heavens for granting me a second chance at life. Living this new life, I see things with much greater clarity. Who says a girl has to be like He Si Hui? I was meant to be multifaceted and vibrant in my own way. I can pursue a master's degree, then a PhD, and delve into technological advancements in my field of expertise, so that I can contribute to my country in the future. Her voice trailed off abruptly, holding on to my belongings. The more I thought about it, the happier I felt. This sense of independence and freedom is something I've never experienced in my past life. After arriving at the station, I took the ticket from my teacher and boarded the train with her to leave, watching the scenery recede into the distance. I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The journey to Jiangsu was quite long, but fortunately we had booked sleeper berths. After a full day and night, we finally reached our destination. Following a day of rest, I treated my teacher and her professor to a meal, and also bought some souvenirs for the professor. I was worried I'd feel awkward and out of place. Perhaps it was the composure from having lived a lifetime before, but I spoke with the professor confidently and articulately. Without a hint of nervousness, the professor's eyes were full of admiration, which made me feel even more self-assured and at ease. In the end, we exchanged contact information. After that, we plunged into the intense exam preparation phase. On the day before school started, I ran into Shen Xingxuan in Jiangsu. I never expected him to follow me all the way to my new rental place. The door I was about to close suddenly got stuck, just as I was so startled that I instinctively reached for my phone to call the police. I looked up and saw him. It's me. He looked much thinner than before, disheveled and worn out from travel, appearing utterly exhausted. Finally found you. His gaze was heavy, his eyes rimmed with red. How could you run off to this place without even hearing me out? I've been searching for you forever. A chill ran down my spine. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but I never imagined how he managed to find me. Perhaps I was too frightened, so he began to explain. You happened to go to a bookstore to buy a book, and the part-time clerk there is my friend who also came here for graduate studies. Otherwise, I would have had to search inch by inch until I grew old. I breathed a sigh of relief, leaning against the door with no intention of letting him in. All right. Are you done being mad? Let me in. As he said this, he grabbed his suitcase and tried to push his way inside. I blocked him more firmly. No need. I thought I made myself perfectly clear at the wedding. I don't want to marry you, and now I'll add that I don't want to see you either. Get lost. Shen Xingxuan refused to believe it. You're just jealous because you saw me with He Si Hui. It's all a misunderstanding. Will you just let me explain? I'm not misunderstanding anything. 1. She's had it hard from you, and you jump through hoops to cater to her every need. What exactly would I be misunderstanding? I went on. I don't like mermaid skirts, and I don't like the magnolia scent you're wearing. His lips parted but no words came out, his face turning ashen pale. He probably thought he was hiding it well, always taking off his coat before entering and tossing it into the room first. But the scent of magnolia had already clung to him from head to toe. In the end, his hands trembling, he shook his head repeatedly. That's not how it is. I ignored him and slammed the door shut while he was still dazed. The teacher's message came through in real time, asking how the preparations were going. As for tomorrow's enrollment, I've naturally got everything ready. Later, I heard it from the teacher's own lips. Over the past few months, Shen Xingxuan, his mother, and He Si Hui have been living in turmoil. The scandal involving Shen Xingxuan and He Si Hui broke out, and the whole city found out about it. His professor decided to suspend his internship first, and upon hearing the news, his mother was so upset that she ended up in the hospital. In an attempt to prove she was better than me, He Si Hui took it upon herself to care for Shen's mother. To my surprise, under Shen Xingxuan's care, she turned out to be utterly clueless about daily life. She either served Shen's mother undercooked kidney beans or forgot the doctor's orders and had her finish the medication in a single day. What should have been a 2-week hospital stay ended up dragging on for 2 whole months. In the end, Mrs. Shen was extremely dissatisfied with Hisihue and instead began to appreciate my qualities. Then, when they ran out of money, they started eyeing the belongings in the apartment. To their surprise, after rummaging through everything, they found nothing of value. It was only after asking the landlord that they learned everything except the kitchenware originally belonged to her. Learning all this filled me with immense satisfaction. That's exactly how it should be. After completing the enrollment procedures, I began research on technological development under the professor's guidance. Having missed the chance to achieve great things in my past life, I won't waste a single moment in this one. So aside from eating and sleeping, I was either holed up in the lab or out on field assignments. When I saw Shen Xingxuan again, I never expected to run into him at the school clinic. Days of non-stop work had left me dizzy, and my first instinct upon seeing him was still to bolt. Shen Xingxuan immediately dropped what he was holding and came after me. Please don't go. I've always known you were studying here. I just didn't want to disturb you. I kept thinking that if you ever needed me, I'd have a chance to be there for you. He said it with such tenderness. Disgusting. I tried to break free from his grip. I think an off-campus hospital would be more appropriate. He forcibly pulled me back for examination, and after realizing it was somewhat serious, carefully picked me up and rushed toward the off-campus area. I never expected this. He ran so fast, yet I felt completely secure in his arms. I was utterly exhausted and had no choice but to let him take me to the hospital for a checkup. In the end, I watched as he gritted his teeth and paid the medical bill with a handful of loose change. I'm gone. He grew poorer by the day. Then, he carefully sat by my side to give me medicine. Watching the nurse administer my 4-drip, he took my hand and said solemnly, he must have been out of his mind to do those things with Hisihue. He promised it won't happen again and that he'll only work for me from now on. Even the nurse couldn't help but speak up after hearing this. You should forgive your boyfriend. Alright. This young man is not only good-looking, but even better as a person. Where can you find such a great guy? Yeah, it's hard to find such a terrible person, I said flatly, without any particular emotion. The nurse was left speechless and eventually shut her mouth and left. The smile on Shen Xingxuan's face flickered for just a moment before fading away. After a long silence, he only managed a single sentence, I'm sorry. He took my hand again. I'm completely fed up, frowning at him. Please just get lost. Then I pulled out $100 from my pocket and shoved it into his hands. 8. This should cover your medical bills and keep you going for a while. All you want is money, isn't it? Fine. Since you've taken care of me, I suppose I can spare you some change. Shen Xingxuan's lips parted, but it took him a long moment to form words. Is that really what you think of me? What else would it be? I began to mock him. How much longer are you going to keep up this righteous act? Load the cargo. Shen Xingxuan flushed with embarrassment at my words, repeatedly standing up and sitting back down. I ignored him and turned my head away. Finally, I heard him say, I'll prove myself. In the end, he sat down completely and refused to leave no matter what. What are you implying? I decided to close my eyes and gather my thoughts. Near the end, I texted my classmates that I was taking sick leave to see a doctor. To my surprise, they all rushed to the hospital to visit me after finding out. A few of them squeezed past Shen Xingxuan next door and started chattering away, asking about my condition. I shook my head with a smile and said I was fine. An old acquaintance brought me here. Their eyes briefly glanced at Shen Xingxuan before turning away without even a hint of a smile. Is that the messed up ex-boyfriend you were talking about? TSK. With that look, he's clearly a scumbag. He'll never come to any good end in this life. Shen Xingxuan was furious and wanted to retort, but the others shut him down, one comment after another. Seeing everyone around me taking my side and speaking up for me, I was just so touched. In my past life, I worked diligently my entire existence, only to be isolated until the very end. Even the manner of my death was undignified. Suddenly, tears began to stream down my face. A sharp-eyed classmate noticed and angrily grabbed Shen Xingxuan by the collar, demanding to know if he had bullied me. My silence was taken as consent. How could the bullying from a past life not count as bullying? Seeing that I didn't respond, Shen Xingxuan's flustered attempt to explain deflated into resignation. The classmates, seeing this, dragged him to a secluded corner and beat him up. He helped me walk back to school on our return. As I passed by the corner, I saw Shen Xingxuan clutching his stomach and grimacing in pain, but he managed to smile when he noticed me. He silently mouthed the question to me. I scoffed. Will this make you feel better? Honestly, I didn't feel much about it. After seeing it, I just stared ahead and pretended I hadn't noticed. So what if I did? Compared to what I went through in my past life, this is nothing. Shen Xingxuan insisted on staying to work as a school doctor, though he's utterly insufferable. But it's such a waste of talent for a medical professional like him to be stuck as a mere school physician. His professor reached out to him multiple times, but he turned down every offer. He said he would stay here to atone for his sins. I was utterly disgusted. After returning from the hospital, he would leave some fruits and snacks at my dormitory door every day. All of them were suitable for my current condition. I didn't keep a single one, dumped them all with the dorm supervisor. We were stuck in that stalemate for a whole month. Sihui showed up, pregnant and visibly showing. She lingered around our school, asking everyone where Shen Xingxuan was. It's obvious to anyone with eyes. She came looking for the baby's father. I noticed her slightly rounded belly, must be about 3 months along. Doing the math, it must have happened right when Shen's mother fell ill. I was so disgusted that I immediately reported it to Shen Xingxuan anonymously. Upon hearing the news, he rushed out of the school gate in a hurry. The two of them were having a heated argument outside the school. I happened to be standing nearby waiting for my takeout, watching Sihui break down in tears. I don't care what you say, you're the father, and you have to take responsibility for this. Shen Xingxuan noticed my gaze and looked back at me, almost as if pleading for help. That has nothing to do with me. Once the food delivery arrived, I grabbed it and walked away without looking back. Later, I met the new school nurse in the infirmary. It turned out that Sihui, desperate and with nowhere else to turn, had approached our principal to plead for Shen Xingxuan's dismissal so he could take care of her and their child. The whole situation gave the principal a headache, and the school nurse position had never been considered particularly important anyway. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he agreed without hesitation. Later, I heard he was forced to marry Sihui after returning home. His professor came looking for him, but Sihui turned him away every time. I let out a bitter laugh. She was afraid the man she'd fought so hard to get back would run away. In the end, Shen Xingxuan had no choice but to find work near home, a life spent in mediocrity. After graduation, I threw myself into national development without hesitation. When I returned home again at 30, I was laden with honors. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man sweeping the street, youthful yet hunched. Weathered by time, little did I know that would be the last time I ever saw Shen Xingxuan. Later, a fire broke out in a dilapidated neighborhood. I only found out through casual conversation with colleagues that those involved were Sihui and Shen Xingxuan, who had ended their lives together due to marital discord. I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of melancholy. Life is full of surprises. Story 2, After being reborn. The first thing I did was go to the hospital to abort the child in my womb, and then I filed for divorce from Gu Jing. I didn't fight for the custody of my son, Gu Shibai, nor did I claim other properties. All I asked for was a seaside view house in a coastal small town. The small 3-bedroom, 1 living room apartment was decorated by me to be very cozy, and all the appliances I bought were parent-child sets. At first, Gu Shibai thought that all of this was prepared for him and scoffed at it. It was not until he found that the pink children's room was piled high with dolls and the wardrobe was filled with beautiful princess dresses that he began to feel panicked. Both he and Gu Jing thought that I was ill, that I had gone crazy. He cried and questioned me. "Mom, I'm your own son, why don't you even look at me? But you're so good to the daughter you imagined." He didn't know that it wasn't an imagination. I really had a beautiful and well-behaved daughter. She lived in the memories of my previous life. 1.5 year after settling down in the coastal small town, I received a call from Gu Jing, asking me why. The process of our divorce was very uneventful, as simple as having a meal together. We both tacitly agreed that Gu Shibai would stay in the Gu family. We didn't argue much about the custody issue. He never asked me the reason for my sudden decision to divorce and coldly completed the procedures. I thought he didn't care. Just like he had never cared about the joys and sorrows of his wife, me, during all these years of our marriage. Now, half a year later, he suddenly asked me, why. At that time, I was hanging a portrait in the newly painted pink children's room. A woman was sitting on the bay window holding a little girl. Outside the window were the blue sea and rows of windmills. The golden sunlight fell on the little girl's face, masking her sickly pallor. I stared blankly at the face of the little girl in the painting. Why? I wanted to say that it was because we were supposed to have a daughter, and her name was Gu Shiwei. She was very beautiful and obedient, but unfortunately, she wasn't healthy. 70% of congenital heart diseases can be detected during prenatal checkups, but she happened to be among the unfortunate 30%. You had a brief fatherly love for her, but soon you would lose patience because of her frequent hospitalizations and surgeries. You would start to stay out all night, using the bad family atmosphere as an excuse. When I was exhausted from taking care of her, when I was praying outside the ICU that death would not take her away, when I signed the consent form to give up treatment alone and watched the doctor pull out her oxygen tube, you would be having an affair with your mistress outside and even openly bring Gusher by with you, making him happily call another woman mom. But in the end, I said nothing. I just asked Gu Jing, "Did you have breakfast with Miss Zhou today?" 2. 1 year after settling down in the coastal small town, I met Gusher Bai. At that time, I had just returned from a trip to Xinjiang. I was walking home wearily with a canvas bag on my back when I saw the figures of the big and the small standing in front of the corridor. I instinctively stopped and kept a distance from them as time passed. I rarely thought of this father and son. They didn't like me, and my feelings for them had also faded away during the long period of disappointment in my previous life. I thought that as long as I didn't deliberately seek them out in this life, we would never meet again. It was Gusher Bai who spoke first. Although he was only 6 years old, he was precocious. His words were milky but hurtful. "The school organized a parent-child trip here. Grandma and Grandpa said that since I'm here, I should come and see you. This is the courtesy and grace that a Gu family member should have." I nodded silently. He really resembled Gu Jing a lot, not only in his delicate and superior features but also in the cold look in his eyes when he looked at me. In my previous life, when I broke down at Weiwei's funeral and when I climbed up to the 36th floor rooftop, the father and son looked at me with the same cold eyes. Gu Jing said, "Xia, stop being naughty." He also said, "Mom, stop being naughty." In fact, a month after the divorce, Gusher Bai contacted me. He heard from someone that I had moved to this coastal small town. He specifically called and told me disdainfully, "They said that after you moved to the seaside, you specially decorated a children's room and even replaced all the daily necessities in the house with parent-child sets. But I won't live with you. Don't waste your efforts." I calmly replied with an And then I heard him cheer on the other end of the phone. "Wow, Aunt Zhou gave me a new game console again. Aunt Zhou is the best." Then he hung up the phone in a hurry. Obviously, my departure didn't have any impact on his life. Compared with getting along with me, his biological mother, he has always preferred those games and also liked Zhou Tian, who always played games with him and gave him game consoles. But now, the coldness on his face suddenly cracked. His peach blossom eyes, which were so similar to Gu Jing's, were instantly filled with tears. He gritted his teeth and stared at me stubbornly. This time, it was my turn to look at him coldly. In the end, he couldn't hold on any longer. Before the tears fell, he turned around and tried to run away, but he tripped and fell to the ground with a thud. He lay on the ground for a while without getting up, just looking back at me. He was always like this. Every time I got close to him, he would always put on an impatient face, speak coldly to me, and show all kinds of disgust. Once my attention was slightly away from him, he would deliberately fall down or pretend to be uncomfortable, making me feel soft-hearted and helpless. But this time, I watched him coldly and remained indifferent. He opened his eyes wide in disbelief, with a look of confusion, puzzlement, and sadness on his face. He burst into tears in front of me with a "Wow, you're a liar. A big liar. You clearly said that you would love me forever and stay with me forever." 3. Gu Jing frowned and accused me. "Xia, although the child is young, he actually understands everything. You shouldn't be so cold to him." His expression was serious, and his attitude was as condescending as ever. It had always been like this between him and me. We were not like a husband and wife but more like an employee and a boss. Most of the time when he was at home, he didn't take the initiative to communicate with me. It was always me who took the initiative to report every bit of my life to him. Regarding the part about myself, he was always indifferent. Only when it came to Gusher Bai would he interfere a little. He would even scold me sharply in front of Gusher Bai and the servants without showing any mercy. As a result, every time he showed even the slightest displeasure, I would unconsciously reflect on myself, engage in internal struggles, and repeatedly think about what I did wrong and what needed to be improved. Now, seeing his face again, I only felt extremely annoyed. "Have you forgotten what you said to me when we got divorced?" He said that he hoped I wouldn't disturb Gusher Bai's life in the future. Bai was still young and would soon get used to living without me as his mother, and that would be the best for him. That was the longest passage he had ever said to me during the entire divorce process. Now he said matter-of-factly, "I was too naive at that time. Bai is your only child, mother and son are connected by heart, he needs you, and you also." I interrupted him, "But I don't need him." Gu Jing was somewhat taken aback and stunned. Neither he nor Bai had ever seen me being so blunt. It seemed that even now he still didn't understand my determination when I left a year ago. Just like he would never understand in his life that Bai was not my only child. I once had a daughter, even if only I knew about it. On the day of my rebirth, I dreamed that Wei Wei was crying, and she also called me a liar. She said, "Mom, you promised me that after I'm gone, you would live well." I felt so sorry for her crying. I promised her that this time, Mom would definitely do it. I could only fulfill one of the promises I made to her and Bai. For once, my love for Bai was no less than that for Wei Wei. He was the child I gave birth to after going through great hardships, the flesh and blood that came from my body. I once eagerly anticipated his arrival, when he couldn't speak yet. As long as he gave me a sweet smile, I could forget all the hardships and pain of being Mrs. Gu. At that time, I was willing to give everything, even my life, to him, as long as he could grow up happily and healthily. Gu Jing didn't love me. The story between him and me was very ordinary. We were childhood sweethearts who grew up together. When we reached the right age and didn't have suitable partners, we were matched up by our elders. I once felt uneasy because of this ordinariness. During my school days, I had witnessed what Gu Jing was like when he was in love with someone. The young Gu Jing was much more energetic and cheerful than he is now. Every time I saw him, he seemed to be smiling. He would smile indifferently when he was scolded, smile triumphantly when he won a basketball game, and smile with joy when he saw the girl he loved. When his peach blossom eyes smiled, they curved into the shape of a crescent moon, like the warm winter sun, making people's hearts flutter and fall in love at first sight. At that time, he would send the breakfast he made with his own hands to the girl he loved early in the morning regardless of the severe cold or intense heat. He would release sky lanterns all over the sky for her, and he would arrange flowers all over the playground and loudly express his love in front of everyone. He was passionate and crazy. That girl was a top student. She won awards in various physics competitions all the way and skipped grades early to go abroad to continue pursuing the truth of physics. After that, Gu Jing seemed to become indifferent to everything. Before the wedding, I once asked Gu Jing if we would really be happy. He answered me, "We will." Love made me blindly ignore the indifference in his tone at that time. I comforted myself that people would always grow up and become more composed, and the way he loved someone would also become more composed. It was not until Zhou Tian appeared by his side, a young and beautiful game planner, then I realized that there was only one way for Gu Jing to love someone. He began to smile when replying to WeChat messages, to pay attention to the lipstick shades that he had never cared about before, to study women's perfumes, and to accompany the other person to stay up late to test the newly launched games. When I found his company nervously because he didn't come home all night, he was having breakfast with another woman and carefully peeling an egg for her bit by bit. That was a treatment I had never enjoyed. At that time, I thought it didn't matter if Gu Jing didn't love me. At least there was someone in this family who loved me. At least Bai loved me. At that time, I didn't know that Bai didn't love me as much as I thought. This child would later break my heart piece by piece. 5. That day ended unhappily. With the tempers of Gu Jing and Bai, I thought they would definitely not come again. Unexpectedly, the next day, Bai appeared downstairs of my house again, carrying a small school bag. This time, he was alone. When the property management contacted me, I was painting. On the beautiful grassland of Ely, a little girl in a princess dress was running freely. I didn't have any photos or videos of Wei Wei. I was afraid that as time passed, one day I would forget what she looked like. So, what I did most often was to draw her bit by bit as I remembered her. From when she was a baby to the age of 5 when her life was frozen in time. I drew a lot, and they filled every corner of my house, but then I thought, how could my Wei Wei only be in the hospital bed? So, I would go on trips every once in a while to take pictures of beautiful scenery and then draw her together with these beautiful landscapes. I was drawing this one a bit slowly. When I was riding a horse in Xinjiang, I hurt my right shoulder. It was still a bit difficult for me to raise my hand, so I hadn't finished this painting even after a month of working on it on and off. That was the first time I rode a horse. When I chose that white horse, the young man in the horse team hesitated and tried to persuade me, saying that this horse had a bad temper, it bullied strangers, and it had thrown several people off. I smiled and said it didn't matter because the white horse was really beautiful. As a result, when the group was halfway through the journey, the white horse indeed threw a tantrum. It suddenly knelt down on its front legs and threw me onto the grass. Everyone in the same team was startled. When a little girl's mother came to help me up, the little girl gently helped me pat the grass debris off my face with her small hand and asked me sweetly in a soft voice, "Auntie, does it hurt?" Later, I took a lot of photos for her and her mother. She reminded me of Weiwei, but in fact, the farthest place Weiwei had been to in her previous life was this coastal small town. At that time, her health was slightly better, and I planned a family vacation, but Gu Jing said he was busy. And Gu Shirbai said he wanted to participate in the testing of a new game in Gu Jing's company. In the end, only my daughter and I came here. Those few short days were peaceful and wonderful. During the day, I taught her to draw in the room, and in the morning and evening, we went to the beach to pick up seashells together. She said that when she got better, she wanted to live in this place for the rest of her life. So, when I got divorced, all I asked for was the seaside view house. This is a home belonging to me and Weiwei, having nothing to do with Gu Shirbai or Gu Jing. I didn't want Gu Shirbai to set foot in this house at all. Without hesitation, I gave the contact information of Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai's grandparents to the property management. A few minutes later, the property management called again, saying that when he contacted Gu Jing, Gu Shirbai ran into the community and disappeared. After all, I had raised Gu Shirbai with great care. There was no way I could really let something happen to him. I sighed, put down the paintbrush, and went downstairs to look for him. I searched the whole community, sweating all over. In the end, I saw him waiting in front of my door, with a look of complacency on his face that said, "I knew you wouldn't leave me alone." I didn't say anything. When I opened the door, I let him slip in like a flash, like a proud little lion. He held his head high and began to patrol the territory everywhere. He asked me, "Which is my room? You must have bought me a game console, right? I want to go to the room and play games." I didn't answer. I asked him to sit in the living room and wait for Gu Jing to pick him up, and then I sat back in front of the easel and focused on finishing the painting. I had only painted a few strokes when I heard a loud crash coming from the children's room. I quickly walked over and saw that the painting hanging on the wall above the head of the bed had fallen to the ground. The frame was in pieces, and the knocked-over perfume liquid had soaked Weiwei's face beyond recognition. Gu Shirbai stepped on the bed and looked at me with a helpless expression. I don't like this painting. Why did you hang someone else's portrait in my room? Why are you holding her in the painting?" I knew that he might just want to take the painting down and didn't break it on purpose. I also knew that he was still a child and I shouldn't lose my temper over something he didn't understand. However, my tone of voice still couldn't help being a bit harsh. "Didn't I ask you to wait for your father in the living room? Don't touch things randomly anymore." He sensed my restrained emotions, and his expression showed a bit of vulnerability. "Before, whenever I broke something, you would always ask me first if I was hurt." I didn't answer. My gaze fell on the bed sheet that he had stepped on and dirted, and I couldn't help frowning. "Come down first." He still stood on the bed without moving, staring straight at me. "Mom, who is this girl you painted? Why did you paint her so many times? Why is every painting in the house of her?" He was still too young to hide the fear and unease in his eyes. He saw those paintings that filled the house. And the girl in the paintings had eyebrows and eyes similar to his. "Mom, why do the security uncle and the uncles and aunts living here all say that you don't have a son, but only a daughter?" I said, "I'm your son," but they said I'm a liar. Even when I showed them our group photo, they still didn't believe me. "This is my room, right?" He jumped off the bed, as if to prove something. He opened the wardrobe, but was stunned when he saw the wardrobe full of princess dresses. "Why did you buy so many dresses? Where are my clothes? Why aren't there any of my clothes?" He rummaged around in the wardrobe, and finally stared at me with wide eyes. Finding nothing, hoping to get an answer from me that could soothe him, I looked at his eyes gradually filled with tears and remained silent. His tears fell one by one in my silence. Suddenly, he went crazy, crying and pulling out the princess dresses in the wardrobe one by one and throwing them on the bed. He swept all the dolls on the bay window to the ground, unreasonably trying to assert his status. "Why did you put someone else's dresses in my wardrobe? I don't like dolls. Why did you put so many dolls in my room? I don't like this bed and quilt. This is a bed for girls. I don't like pink. Why did you make my room this color? Why are you holding another girl? Why did you hang the painting of you and someone else in my room? I don't like her. I hate her. Hate her. This time, I couldn't bear it anymore. Goosher bye, get out. This isn't your room. There isn't a room for you here. 7. When Gu Jing came to pick him up, Goosher bai said to him in a panic, Dad, Mom has gone crazy. She keeps telling everyone that she only has a daughter. 8. When Gu Jing and Goosher bai came again a month later, they both became very cautious in their attitudes. Gu Jing said, Sinclair, you're ill. He asked me to have a video call with my relatives and friends, and let them tell me that the daughter I painted, the daughter I told all the neighbors I loved deeply, didn't exist and was just my imagination. They took out the family photo album and forcibly pulled me to recall the past with them, but our past was too meager. Just like this photo album that couldn't be filled, it was almost impossible to find a few group photos of the three of us. Most of the photos recorded Gu Shirbai's growth, with some photos of me and him mixed in, as he gradually grew up. Perhaps it was the nature of boys that made him get closer to the person in the family who had more authority and could provide him with better conditions. He understood Gu Jing's indifference and alienation towards me, and he didn't want to take photos with me anymore. Now, they were holding that photo album with hardly any photos of me, recounting every bit of the past, desperately trying to convince me that I had never had a daughter. I sneered, Are you saying that I'm crazy? Gu Jing shook his head, No, Sinclair, you're just ill. He took out a surgical consent form, held my hand, and his tone was even a bit choked up. Sinclair, why didn't you tell me that we originally had another child? I looked at him in silence. Guilt and regret appeared on his face. Regarding Zhou Tian, I can explain, it's not what you think. He said that he only paid more attention to Zhou Tian because he cherished her talent, and being good to her was just a means to win over his subordinates. His tone was gentler than ever before. Sinclair, I know that you were impulsive and had an abortion and divorced me because you misunderstood the relationship between me and Zhou Tian. Afterwards, you regretted it, so you imagined that you had a daughter. Sinclair, it's my fault. I didn't maintain a proper distance with my subordinate, which made you misunderstand and feel sad, and caused you to be so seriously ill. We were husband and wife for 12 years in the previous life. And I had never seen Gu Jing speak to me in such a lowly manner. I stared at him in surprise, as if I was meeting this person for the first time. You know, in the previous life, when I noticed something was wrong between him and Zhou Tian, every time I questioned and probed him, he would only coldly retort, Sinclair, are you crazy? Even half a year ago, when he called to ask me why, he still didn't answer my question in the end. Now, he thought I was really ill, and suddenly he could talk. For the first time, he explained his relationship with Zhou Tian to me. He said, Sinclair, you're ill and need treatment. Let me and Shirbai accompany you and take care of you. Okay, I told him to get out with Gu Shirbai. 9. When Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai came for the second time, they brought a psychologist with them. At that time, I had just come back from Mexico a few days ago. The doctor's surname was Lin. He took a look at my neck and his tone was as easygoing as if we were old friends who had known each other for a long time. What's wrong with your neck? I raised my hand and touched the thin purple mark on my neck and replied casually, I had a little accident when I was playing sea paragliding in Cancun a few days ago. That was the last stop of my trip to Mexico. When I was gliding in the air over the sea on a paraglider pulled by a speedboat, the rope connecting the speedboat suddenly broke. I was caught off guard and fell into the sea from dozens of meters in the air. Although I was wearing a life jacket, the rope of the paraglider strangled my neck and wrapped me and the seat together. I couldn't float to the surface at all. I gradually lost my strength due to lack of oxygen during the struggle and almost died in that sea. Fortunately, the guy driving the speedboat dived into the water in time to save me. Thinking about it now, it still feels thrilling. Dr. Lin didn't ask further. He took a look at the painting on the easel whose paint hadn't dried yet. Wei Wei was sitting on the paraglider, smiling at the blue sky and white clouds. He politely asked me if he could take a look at my other paintings. After I agreed, he carefully looked at all the paintings in my house, and then held one of them and asked me, Can you tell me the creative idea of this painting? It was a view of the water from an overhead perspective. Wei Wei was floating on the water face up, smiling and spreading her arms, as if welcoming and trying to embrace something. I painted this after I came back from bungee jumping in the Gandaki River in Nepal. There were quite a few tourists who went bungee jumping that day. They were either nervous or excited and sought encouragement from their companions or the staff. Only I had a calm expression. The staff joked with me in English, saying that I didn't look like I was here to have fun, but rather like I was here to commit suicide. And he didn't even dare to push me, although he said that, when he pushed me down, he didn't show any mercy at all. The wind during the rapid fall pressed against my cheeks and my eyes. The momentary feeling of weightlessness made me in a trance, as if I had returned to the end of my previous life when I jumped off the 37th floor. In fact, the memories and sensations at that time were very vague. Everything ended in just a blink of an eye, but this time, the feeling of freedom during the fall was so clear. When I was approaching the water surface, I had a hallucination. I saw Weiwei's figure faintly appearing in the water. She smiled and stretched out her arms to me, wanting to hug me, but the moment I tried to hold her tightly, she shattered into the sparkling waves of the Gandaki River. I didn't answer Dr. Lin's question. Dr. Lin was very patient. He patiently tried to analyze the logic behind my actions. Sinclair, when you had an abortion, the baby was just an embryo that hadn't developed gender characteristics. Why did you think it was a girl? Is it possible that you projected yourself onto it? I laughed. Are you saying that I'm narcissistic? No. Dr. Lin shook his head. You're feeling sorry for yourself. Is there a possibility that you transferred your resentment towards your husband onto the child? But after you had the abortion, you regretted it, so you created an imaginary girl based on yourself. Similarly, it's not that you don't love Gusherbai anymore, you love him too much, but you also take out your anger on him. You can only pour all your love for him onto this imaginary girl, but this little girl is too dangerous for you. He let out a soft sigh. Wild riding, paragliding, bungee jumping. Sinclair, have you noticed that you're always pursuing high-risk games? This imaginary little girl is inducing you to test death. If you don't open your heart and accept treatment, the consequences will be unimaginable. Sinclair, I want to help you. Gu Jing chimed in beside him. Sinclair, accept treatment. Let us help you and take care of you. Okay. Gu Sherbai also came forward and tried to hold my hand, showing an unprecedentedly obedient attitude. I said, how could Mom suddenly not love me anymore? It turns out that you're ill. Let us help you, Mom. Can you also paint a picture for me? You've never painted for me. I interrupted him. I have painted for you. On your birthday last year, I gave you a portrait of you as a birthday gift. I was only above average in my academic performance since I was a child, and I couldn't compare with the top students that Gu Jing liked. But I had a great talent for art and was admitted to the best art academy in the country. Unfortunately, my parents always thought that I couldn't earn much money just by painting. They hoped that I would get married as soon as possible after graduating from the art academy, so that they wouldn't have to worry about me anymore and could go to live in New Zealand with my elder brother with peace of mind. I compromised, because the person they introduced to me was Gu Jing. At that time, I thought that I could still continue painting after getting married, but I soon became pregnant with Gu Sherbai. Family chores and raising Gu Sherbai gradually took up a lot of my time. Whenever I wanted to focus and paint a good painting, Gu Sherbai would suddenly start crying and making a fuss. I could only put down the paintbrush to coax him, and gradually I neglected my painting, until Gu Sherbai's 5th birthday. On a whim, I picked up the paintbrush that I hadn't used for a long time and painted a portrait of him. But he obviously liked the game console that Zhou Tian gave him better and casually threw the portrait aside. Later, I saw that painting under the small desk in his room, folded into a small square and used to prop up the table leg. 10. Gu Sherbai defended himself in a trembling voice. I didn't do it on purpose. I must have taken the wrong one. I smiled and exposed him. No, you did it on purpose. Because that day, you were dawdling and refused to take a bath. I confiscated your game console. And you deliberately did this to get back at me. You've always been like this. Whenever I don't do as you wish, you would hurt me by destroying the gifts I gave you and trampling on my kindness. Because you know that I love you and care about you, and I will be sad if you do this. You want to make me sad. Gu Sherbai's face turned slightly pale, and he stammered for a long time but couldn't say anything. 11. I raised my eyes and looked at Gu Jing. In fact, I had already seen his hidden intention of making peace. For example, in the previous life, Gu Sherbai's school never organized a parent-child trip. For example, with so many bodyguards and nannies in the Gu family, how could they let Gu Sherbai run out alone and not be in a hurry at all? Also, whether it was in the previous life or after being reborn, in fact, he hadn't worn the clothes I bought for him for a long time. From a certain day on, he, who had never bothered about his clothes before, started buying clothes and bringing them home himself. Later, I found out that all those clothes were bought for him by Zhou Tian, to make Zhou Tian happy. He never touched the clothes I bought for him again, and even changed his perfume to the leather scent that Zhou Tian liked. But these few times when he came to see me, he specifically wore the clothes I bought for him and sprayed the woody perfume that I preferred. I just didn't care. I didn't care why he suddenly wanted to make up with me after a year. I also didn't care why, since I had already made room, he didn't just bring Zhou Tian into the house directly. Because I didn't care, I didn't expose it. It's just that he had been so arrogant in front of me for so long. Even when trying to make peace, he couldn't let go of his pride. He only thought of using Gu Shirbai to make me soft-hearted and take the initiative to come back to him. Now, he thought I was ill. It seemed that he had suddenly found an excuse to lower his head to me. His attitude changed 180 degrees. In an instant, he learned to be gentle and accommodating, as if because I was a patient, I suddenly became a fragile item that needed his protection. All his actions had a great and selfless reason. For my own good, he performed so sincerely that I almost believed him. Gu Jing, you said that there's nothing between you and Zhou Tian. Then why did you spend a lot of money to find high-quality jade? Because she is prone to getting sick. Carve a Buddha statue with your own hands, and then kneel step by step up the 81 steps of Nanshan Temple and ask a senior monk to consecrate it. Even when Wei Wei was so seriously ill in the previous life, as her father, he had never done such a thing for her. Why did you use working overtime as an excuse to spend Valentine's Day with her? Why did you hug her and kiss her? Gu Jing's face also turned ugly. I smiled. Are you wondering why I know all this so clearly? It was your son who told me. The first time I heard the name Zhou Tian was from Gu Shirbai. Suddenly, one day, he started frequently telling me how nice Aunt Zhou is, what Aunt Zhou and Dad did together again. Mom, why can't you be as nice as Aunt Zhou? At first, he might have said these things unintentionally, but later, he was clearly doing it on purpose. As I said, he was precocious. After noticing that I would feel sad every time I heard the name Zhou Tian, whenever I did something that displeased him, he would deliberately bring up Zhou Tian. I knew he liked Zhou Tian and those video games, but it's not certain that he really wanted her to be his mother. He just took pleasure in using the revelation of his father's intimacy with another woman as a way to punish me and confront me, especially after I had Wei Wei in my previous life. His behavior became even more excessive. During my pregnancy, he would casually say, Mom is fat and ugly, she's not as thin and pretty as Aunt Zhou. During my lactation period, he would nonchalantly say, Mom's belly is so flabby with so many stretch marks, her clothes are so messy, stained with milk, and she smells of milk. It's so disgusting. No wonder Dad sleeps in a separate room from you. When I was accompanying Wei Wei during her surgery and hospitalization, he would often tell me that Gu Jing gave Zhou Tian this today and accompanied her to do that tomorrow. He would excitedly tell me how amazing Zhou Tian was, that she designed a new game again, and that he had a new game to play. Unlike me, who was so useless, after returning from a business trip with Gu Jing, he would tell me where he, Gu Jing, and Zhou Tian went and what they played. He said that others thought they were a family of 3. He would show me the photos taken of the 3 of them in a boastful manner and ask me if they were well taken. He thought he was hiding his true feelings well, but every time he said these things, I could clearly see the malice in his eyes. I first experienced the innocent malice of a child from my own son. He was like a devil, repeating the incantation that drove me crazy in my ear every day. I knew that at that time, many nosy relatives and friends would maliciously provoke him, saying that with the second child, I would only love Wei Wei and not love him anymore. I also asked myself whether I was really biased between him and Wei Wei, which led to his wayward behavior, but after much thought, I was sure that I wasn't. Even though I was constantly shuttling between the hospital and home for Wei Wei, I would ask Gu Shirbai about his well-being every day, carefully inquire with the nanny whether he ate properly, and help him check his homework. Unless Wei Wei was having surgery, I would attend his parent-teacher meetings, even if I hadn't slept for 48 hours in the hospital and was extremely exhausted. In fact, before Wei Wei was born, he didn't like my company. He always thought I was nagging and annoying, that I had nothing better to do than to hover around him. He preferred to stay alone in his room playing games. But when I stopped focusing on him and spent the attention and time he didn't want on his sister, he got upset. He could reject and not cherish it. but I wasn't allowed to give it to anyone else. 13. I didn't know who he inherited this selfish trait from. It wasn't until after I was reborn and left Gu Jing without hesitation, yet he shamelessly came to reconcile, that I was sure he was like his father, the man who, when I was exhausted by Wei Wei's illness and my heart was broken by Gu Shirbai's constant intentional provocations, was busy having an affair and figuring out how to divorce me. Didn't I want to get a divorce too? I'm not a masochist, nor am I infatuated to the point of not being able to live without Gu Jing, but for Wei Wei's sake, I couldn't. The cost of Wei Wei's treatment couldn't be afforded by an ordinary income. However, if I divorced and left Wei Wei with Gu Jing, given his attitude of preferring to spend time with Zhou Tian rather than visiting Wei Wei in the hospital, I couldn't rest assured. Moreover, Wei Wei's heart condition might not be able to withstand the shock of a family accident, so I could only grit my teeth and hold on. I often wondered why Gu Jing could love Gu Shirbai but not Wei Wei. Wei Wei was so beautiful and well-behaved, facing the pain of illness and countless surgeries. She would endure until she couldn't bear it anymore before crying. Even when she was scared being alone with the nurse in the hospital, she would always urge me to get more rest. She missed her father and brother, confused as to why they never came to see her, but she never asked or complained. At such a young age, she was heartbreakingly sensible. It wasn't until after Wei Wei died that I saw the long-prepared divorce agreement in his study. Then I understood that her existence prevented him from proposing divorce to me, a man who proposed divorce to his wife while his daughter was on the verge of death. He knew how much public outcry he and Zhou Tian would face. He couldn't afford to lose that face. Since he couldn't get rid of me, he took his anger out on Wei Wei. Gu Shirbai saw how indifferent Gu Jing was to Wei Wei and followed suit. Even though Wei Wei liked him as a brother, he didn't want to stay in the hospital a little longer to accompany his poor sister. Even when I forced him to come sometimes, he would just sit there with his head down, playing games, and ignore Wei Wei when she talked to him. Even worse, when I wasn't around, he would deliberately provoke Wei Wei, just like he did to me. 14. The day Wei Wei passed away was her 5th birthday. I specifically called Gu Jing and begged him to come home in the evening so that our family of 4 could celebrate Wei Wei's birthday properly. The birthday gift I prepared for Wei Wei was a painting. It was the same one that I painted again after being reborn and hung in the children's room, but was later destroyed by Gu Shirbai. I was holding her and sitting on the bay window. Outside the window was the blue sea and rows of windmills. The golden sunlight fell on her face, covering up her sickly pallor. Wei Wei loved it and kept it by her side, looking at it from time to time, but until it was time to light the candles on the cake, Gu Jing still hadn't come back. I saw the disappointment in Wei Wei's eyes. I went to the kitchen to call Gu Jing, but no one answered no matter how many times I called. When I returned to the living room, still thinking about how to explain to Wei Wei why her father was absent from her birthday, I heard the 11-year-old Gu Shirbai looking at the painting with contempt and disdain, saying viciously, "It's so ugly, her face is as white as a ghost. In our school, a girl as ugly as you would only be hated. No wonder Dad doesn't want to celebrate your birthday with you." Wei Wei's face turned deathly pale. I could hardly believe my ears. Had Gu Shirbai been speaking to Wei Wei so meanly when I wasn't around? In all these years, I had never laid a hand on Gu Shirbai, but this time, I couldn't control myself and slapped him, holding his cheek. He looked at me in shock and shouted at me angrily, "Dad went on a date with Aunt Zhou. He won't come back to celebrate this sickly girl's birthday. It's no use how many times you call. From now on, I won't celebrate her birthday either. Dad will divorce you, marry Aunt Zhou, and I'll be with them as a family of 3. I don't want this sickly girl, and I don't want you either." Wei Wei collapsed on the spot, clutching her chest. When I carried her limp body into the ambulance that day, I desperately prayed that God would be merciful one more time, but after the doctor's rescue, I was still told that Wei Wei's physical condition couldn't withstand another surgery, and they advised me to give up. Looking at the suffering Wei Wei in the hospital bed, my mind went blank, and I felt extremely lost. I kept calling Gu Jing, but he never answered. Later, I found out that he was in Zhou Tian's bed. In the end, I signed the consent form to give up treatment alone and watched as the doctor removed Wei Wei's oxygen tube and turned off all the medical equipment. Gu Jing was the last one to arrive at the hospital. Even Gu Jing's parents and the funeral home staff had already arrived by the time he rushed in. He questioned me, asking why I didn't wait for him and why I had unilaterally given up treatment. I thought to myself, what was there to wait for him for? wait for him to get out of his mistress's bed and come to Weiwei's bedside to put on an act of being a loving father, just to avoid being criticized for not being there when his daughter was on her deathbed. Should my Weiwei suffer a few more hours for the sake of his reputation? I looked at him and then at Gu Shirbai standing far outside the hospital room door. The expressions on their father-son faces were equally indifferent. One was busy having an affair while his biological daughter was on the verge of death, not even spending her last birthday with her. The other had maliciously provoked his own sister to death. Why could they be so calm? Why didn't they shed a single tear? I suddenly found the father-son pair terrifying. 15. I know these are all things that happened in my previous life. They haven't happened yet in this life, and they will never happen again. Perhaps I shouldn't judge the 6-year-old Gu Shirbai for crimes that haven't occurred in this life, but I can't help it. I gently pulled my hand away from Gu Shirbai's and smiled at Dr. Lin. Dr. Lin, you're wrong. The little girl in the painting isn't a dangerous presence for me. Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai are. If one day I go crazy or die, it will definitely be these two who push me towards madness and death. 16. When Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai came for the third time, their attitudes became tough again. At that time, I was about to leave for Iceland. Just as I was pulling my suitcase to enter the elevator, I was stopped by Gu Jing, who came out of another elevator. He threatened me, Xia, if you still refuse to accept treatment from a psychologist, I'll have no choice but to force you into a psychiatric hospital. I looked at him mockingly. In what capacity do you plan to force me to be admitted? We're divorced, and you're not my guardian. We have no relationship left. Ex-husband, Gu Shirbai interrupted. Well, can't I do it then? I'm your son. I looked down at him. Too bad you're still a minor. They were helpless against me. I turned to leave. But Gu Jing reached out to stop me again and accidentally tore the necklace around my neck. The necklace fell to the ground, and the cover of the pendant came off, revealing a small photo of Weiwei that I had printed and put inside. Gu Jing stared at the small portrait in a daze, and finally lost his temper. Since you decided to have an abortion on your own, you shouldn't regret it. I clenched the broken necklace tightly with my trembling hands, refusing to show any weakness, and slapped him in return. He understood nothing, he knew nothing. After being reborn, I also hesitated and struggled, but at the end of my previous life, Weiwei lay in the hospital bed, crying and saying to me, Mom, I feel so rotten, it hurts so much. If there's a next life, can I not be born into this world? I really couldn't help it. I put the broken necklace in my pocket, without looking at Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai again, pulled my suitcase, and entered the elevator. 17. In winter, Iceland exudes an extreme sense of desolation. The surging waves crash against the black sand beach, and the dark sand formed by lava contrasts sharply with the white waves, waterfalls, volcanoes, glaciers, fjords. This small island boasts a variety of unique landforms and wonderful landscapes, due to its proximity to the Arctic Circle. The daylight hours in winter are very short, the sun hovers near the horizon, and the morning glow seamlessly connects to the evening glow. The pink-purple belt of Venus in the sky can last for a long time. When I came, I brought a lot of expensive photography equipment. After landing at Keflavik Airport, I rented a car and planned to drive around the island to chase the aurora borealis. Unfortunately, either the aurora KP index was below 1 on clear days, or the weather was too bad with thick clouds, and I failed to capture any photos of the aurora. On the last day of my trip, the weather forecast predicted a blizzard the next evening, and the roads might be closed for several days. I had to give up the remaining itinerary. I was unwilling to leave without capturing the aurora, although the aurora KP index was still only 1 that day. Since the weather seemed clear, I decided to drive out at night and take a chance. I found an open wasteland in the wild and waited in the car until 3 a.m., but still saw nothing. Finally, I was disheartened and decided to give up. But sometimes, fate likes to play jokes. Just as I started the car to leave, the aurora appeared. The green light bands danced in the sky, flickering on and off, changing unpredictably, both magnificent and mysterious. I quickly grabbed my photography equipment, found the best vantage point, and set it up to record this gift from nature. In the temperature of more than 10 degrees below zero, I couldn't stand the cold after watching the aurora for a while. So I decided to take a nap in the car and let the equipment continue shooting automatically. The necklace that Gu Jing tore was hanging on the rearview mirror of the car, and Weiwei in the pendant was smiling at me. Looking at her face, I also smiled. Weiwei, look, Mom has brought you to see the aurora. 18, I lay in the car, looking at the dancing aurora outside the window, and it took a long time for me to fall asleep. As a result, I woke up a bit late, and it was already dawn. A strong wind had started blowing outside the car. The place where I set up my photography equipment was a bit far from the roadside where I parked. The swirling snow reduced visibility, and I couldn't even see the equipment clearly from inside the car. I calculated the time it would take to drive back to Akureyri, considering the blizzard that was supposed to come in the evening. I got out of the car and braved the wind and snow to collect my equipment. At that time, I didn't know that the blizzard time predicted by the Icelandic weather forecast wasn't always accurate, and it was common for it to arrive earlier or later than expected. When I reached the place where I set up the equipment, I found that both tripods had been blown over, and one of the cameras was nowhere to be found. Blown away by the wind, I groped around in the snow, which was several times thicker than last night, for a long time before I found the broken camera, fearing that the melting snow would damage the SD card. I quickly took out the SD cards from both cameras and put them in my pocket separately. When I finished packing my equipment and started walking back, the world around me was a sea of white, and the visibility was less than 5 meters. The car key for the vehicle I rented didn't have a car finding button. I could only carry the heavy cameras and tripods and try to make my way back to the car based on my sense of direction. I walked for a long time, much farther than the actual distance from where I set up the equipment to the car, before I realized that I had lost my way in the early arriving blizzard. I tried to figure out my direction, but I was exhausted. In the end, I had to abandon the heavy cameras and tripods, yet I still couldn't find the car. I took out my phone to call for rescue, only to find that there was no signal. I was left to search blindly in the howling blizzard alone. The raging storm grew more and more intense. The biting wind, carrying snowflakes, made it impossible for me to open my eyes. I walked slower and slower, feeling my body gradually losing heat. My limbs grew so cold and numb that I could only move forward on instinct. Finally, I collapsed in the snow. I thought I was going to die in the blizzard of a foreign land, but I wasn't afraid. Instead, I felt a sense of relief. I said in my heart, "Sorry, Weiwei. Mom didn't want to break her promise to you, but I really can't hold on anymore." In fact, Dr. Lin was right. I was indeed ill, and I had been tempting death. 19. After Weiwei died in my previous life, I suffered from severe depression. Or perhaps I had already been ill since I discovered Gu Jing's infidelity, since Gu Shirbai constantly provoked me, and since I accompanied Weiwei through countless surgeries and hospitalizations. Every day, the world seemed grey to me, and everything around me was full of malice. My husband and son were so cold-hearted, and my daughter was so pitiful. I struggled desperately, exhausting myself every day, yet I still couldn't see a way forward or a glimmer of hope. But for Weiwei's sake, I gritted my teeth and persevered, pretending that everything was fine in front of her, not letting her discover the cracks in the family or the ugly truth about her father and brother. Until Weiwei's death, all the suppressed negative emotions suddenly erupted, swallowing me up like an abyss. On one hand, I told myself not to die because I had promised Weiwei that I would live well even if she was gone. On the other hand, I couldn't stop hurting myself. At first, Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai did feel guilty. They tried to hide their true feelings, but they couldn't have been completely indifferent to Weiwei's death. People are sometimes so contradictory. They try to escape their sins while also feeling compelled to feel guilty and make amends. They pretended that everything was fine in front of me, just as I had done before. Gu Jing stopped seeing Zhou Tian, and Gu Shirbai stopped saying hurtful things to me. They pretended that we were a happy family of 3, but it didn't help me at all. I always remembered the identical cold looks in their eyes when they were by Weiwei's bedside. No matter how much they smiled at me or how gentle they were, in my eyes, they were still heartless, terrifying, and loathsome, the most detestable monsters in the world. The closer they got to me, the worse my condition became. I couldn't control my crying in the middle of the night, my outbursts of temper, or my self-harm. Soon, they began to lose patience. Thinking I was an embarrassment and a burden, they reverted to their old ways. Gu Jing started staying out late again, and Gu Shirbai began his sarcastic remarks once more. The day I climbed to the rooftop of the 37th floor, Gu Shirbai shouted at me with a look of disgust, "It's all your fault that Gu Shirwei died. It has nothing to do with anyone else. There's no genetic disease in our family. If you had given her a healthy body, she wouldn't have gotten sick and died." I stood on the edge of the rooftop, stunned. Was it really my fault? It must have been something I didn't pay attention to during pregnancy that caused Weiwei to have a heart condition and suffer in this world. The thin thread that had been holding me back from death snapped at that moment. And I jumped off the 37th floor. 20. Depression doesn't heal on its own after being reborn. Even though I got a second chance at life, those negative emotions were still there. On the day of the abortion, I even hoped that I would bleed to death on the operating table and leave this world with Weiwei, but I dreamed of her. She always begged me not to die, crying. I didn't want to let her down. That day, when I got home, I saw Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai still living their lives without a care. They understood nothing, they knew nothing. Only I knew everything that happened in the previous life, only I carried all the pain, and only I remembered their sins and their hideous appearances, so I fled from those two monsters, Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai, but it wasn't enough. Those negative emotions persisted, as did the pain and the sense of guilt. I didn't want to break my promise to Weiwei. I closed my eyes. 21. Beep, 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 beep. Suddenly, the continuous honking of a car horn pierced through the blizzard where the visibility was zero. The harsh sound cut through the wind and snow and reached my ears persistently, irritating me so much that I felt annoyed. I struggled with the dark and negative thoughts in my mind for a long time amidst the unceasing car horns. I really wanted to give up. I really wanted to give up. But then I thought of Weiwei. Finally, I opened my eyes, struggled to get up from the snow, and found the tripod that I had discarded earlier. To my surprise, I realized that I had been walking in circles, using the tripod as a crutch. With my almost frozen limbs, I crawled towards the direction of the car horn with all my might. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. When I finally found the car, I realized that it hadn't been far from me at all. At most, 100 meters away. How should I describe the miraculous scene I saw when I opened the car door, shivering, no matter how many times I thought about it later? I believed that it was Weiwei's spirit that saved me in the deadly blizzard and guided me to safety, because it was simply impossible. The heavy tripod I had placed on the passenger seat, perhaps due to the blizzard shaking the car, had toppled towards the driver's seat. The necklace I had hung on the rearview mirror somehow fell and wrapped around the tripod, pressing down on the horn. In the continuous honking, Weiwei and the pendant smiled at me. At that moment, tears streamed down my face. Epilogue. After getting back in the car that day, my phone regained signal. I called for rescue, and half an hour later, Icelandic rescue workers arrived and took me to a local hospital for examination. Fortunately, my frostbite wasn't too severe, and I returned to China after a few days in the hospital. After experiencing that blizzard, my depression seemed to heal suddenly. I had always known that this coastal town was beautiful, but during the year I lived there, I had been living numbly, feeling nothing. Even though I traveled a lot, I couldn't really appreciate any of the beautiful scenery. But after coming back from Iceland, I suddenly felt that everything was different. The huge windmills in the distance turned leisurely, the blue sea gently washed the golden beach, and the glow of the setting sun on the rusty old ship was so beautiful that it made people stop and stare. The world was no longer gray. It was filled with so much color. I still lived there, continued to paint, and traveled around, but I no longer deliberately engaged in dangerous activities. I started to get involved in new media, posting the paintings of Weiwei and some of my travel photography works online, which attracted a lot of attention. Suddenly, I became a rising star painter and photographer with many fans. A year later, someone contacted me, wanting to hold an art exhibition for me, and I agreed. The theme of the exhibition was An Angel Once Came. All the works on display were portraits of Weiwei. Surprisingly, a large number of people came to the opening day, including Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai. Although I didn't care much, they had actually been harassing me. After realizing that they couldn't force me to accept psychological treatment, Gu Jing changed his approach. In both the previous life and this life, during our marriage, he had never given me flowers or any surprises. Now, he was actually trying to use this method to tempt me into remarrying him. I scoffed at his efforts. As for Gu Shirbai, every time he saw me buying things for Weiwei, he was extremely jealous. When I loved him before, he seemed to prefer video games, but now, no matter how many games Zhou Tian gave him, he would just tell her to leave. Gu Jing had also fired her. Now, it seemed that he wanted my motherly love more than video games. He cried and said to me, "Mom, I'm your real son. Why don't you even look at me? But you're so good to the daughter you imagined." They suddenly stopped bothering me a week ago. I thought they had finally gotten tired and given up, but now, They showed up at my art exhibition. Seeing the wary look on my face, Gu Jing gave a bitter smile. You don't have to be like this, we're not here to cause trouble. He stared at the nearest painting, Wei Wei smiling like an angel in the blizzard. Gu Jing's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. Xinxia. I've been having the same dream lately, dreaming that we have a daughter named Gu Shiwei. With his eyes red from crying, Gu Shibai also looked at me and asked, Mom, I had the same dream, is it true? I looked at the father-son pair coldly and said nothing. That day, Gu Jing and Gu Shibai, with red-rimmed eyes, carefully looked at every painting in the exhibition. The last painting covered an entire wall, under the magnificent aurora in Iceland. Wei Wei grew white wings and flew towards the sky. She was my angel, and she had once been here. Gu Jing and Gu Shibai stood in front of the painting for a long time. After that, they never appeared in my life again. Extra chapter. When Gu Shibai was 11 years old, Xinxia remarried and soon had a daughter named Xiangyang. On the day Xiangyang was born, Gu Shibai climbed to the rooftop of the 37th floor, insisting on seeing Xinxia. Gu Jing looked at him impatiently and said, Gu Shibai, stop making a scene. At that moment, both father and son froze. They both thought of that dream and the previous life. When Xinxia stood precariously in the wind on the 37th floor, they had also said to her, stop making a scene. The blood that splattered when Xinxia fell and the pallor of Gu Shiwei's death had been Gu Jing's lingering nightmares for years. Xinxia's assessment of him was right, he was a jerk. He had always thought that Xinxia was too dull, too quiet, and too unremarkable. She repeated the same things at home every day, wore similar clothes, and lived like a backdrop. It wasn't until after the divorce, when Xinxia left without looking back, that he realized his true feelings for her. She was like the silent rain that moistened everything, gradually seeping into every part of his life. Once she was gone, it was as if a huge void had suddenly opened up in his heart, impossible to fill. He would instinctively call her name when he couldn't find something. He would turn around, having the illusion that she was waiting for him behind him. One late night, when he reached out and found nothing beside him in his drowsy state, his longing for her suddenly overwhelmed him like a rampant virus, taking over all his rationality. He had to get her back. At that time, he understood nothing, he knew nothing. He thought he had hidden his affair with Zhou Tian well and that he could pretend nothing had happened, since Xinxia loved him so much. She would surely come back to him without hesitation as long as he showed a little kindness. He didn't know that Gu Shibai had told Xinxia everything behind his back. He had no idea what he had done in the previous life. He couldn't understand why Xinxia looked at him with such cold, mocking eyes, as if he were something dirty. It wasn't until he had that dream, in the dream, after Xinxia's death in the previous life. He also came to his senses like he did now and finally realized his feelings for Xinxia. The guilt, heartache, and longing were so intense that they almost drove him crazy. He knew he had to do something, he had to take action, so, he took revenge on Zhou Tian. He drove her out of the company, leaving her with no way out, drowning in debt, and eventually forcing her to sell her body. In the end, she contracted a venereal disease and came to him with a knife. As she insanely plunged the knife into his heart, she roared, "Did I force you to cheat? Did I force you to sleep with me? It's you, you're the one who's a jerk and can't control yourself. Why do you blame everything on me?" Yes, he was such a despicable person, always eager to shift the blame and avoid the truth. Just like he knew that Wei Wei's congenital heart disease was likely caused by Xinxia's emotional shock after discovering his infidelity during pregnancy, which led to Wei Wei's congenital deficiencies, but he didn't want to admit it, so, he ignored Xinxia's pain and Wei Wei's illness, using his affair to numb himself. Even on the day Wei Wei died, he still didn't want to admit that he was wrong. He blamed Zhou Tian, claiming that it was her soft and fragrant body that held him back, and that it was she who secretly set his phone to silent, causing him to miss Xinxia's calls and thus miss Wei Wei's last birthday. He blamed Xinxia, saying that it was she who signed the consent form to give up treatment without authorization, and that it was she who prematurely ended Wei Wei's life, preventing him from seeing her for the last time. It was all their fault. He was blameless. He had always distorted the truth and told himself this, so Xinxia was right. He was a terrifying monster, repulsive and unrepentant. He deserved to fail in winning back Xinxia's love. He was unworthy of it. He no longer dared to see her. In fact, he didn't really want to give up on Xinxia. He still wanted to keep pestering her, but he was afraid of her cold gaze, which reflected all his darkness and laid bare all his dirt. So over the years, He had restrained himself and also kept an eye on Gu Shirbai, preventing both of them from disturbing Xinxia. In truth, he also blamed Gu Shirbai, resenting him for provoking Wei Wei to death in the previous life and for driving Xinxia to her end. Even though he had never properly guided Gu Shirbai or stopped his bad behavior, he could deceive himself into believing that he was not at fault and that it was all the fault of the 11-year-old Gu Shirbai. In the previous life, after Xinxia's death, Gu Shirbai himself suffered from severe depression. Xinxia was spot on when she said that Gu Shirbai's bad traits were just like his. Just as he only repented after Xinxia's death, Gu Shirbai only realized how much he loved the mother he had been mentally abusing after her death. Gu Shirbai began to cry uncontrollably for no apparent reason, lose his temper for trivial reasons, and harm himself if not watched closely, just as Xinxia had done before. And Gu Jing watched all this coldly, with no intention of intervening. In the previous life, Gu Jing had no idea what became of Gu Shirbai after his own death. However, in this life, after having the same dream about the previous life as Gu Jing, Gu Shirbai suffered from the same severe depression as before. He would often cry and beg to see Xinxia, clutching his chest and asking Gu Jing, "Dad, my heart hurts so much. Do I have a heart disease like my sister? If I have a heart disease too, will Mom and my sister forgive me?" But every time he went to the hospital for an examination, the results showed that everything was normal. When he got a bit older and understood what a psychological effect was, he stopped asking Gu Jing this question, but he still clamored to see Xinxia. Since he was under Gu Jing's watch, he could only spy on every aspect of Xinxia's life through the internet and other people. After discovering that Xinxia had a new boyfriend, he began to provoke Gu Jing just as he had once provoked Xinxia. He would deliberately tell Gu Jing where Xinxia had gone to play with that man, that Xinxia had received gifts from him, that Xinxia had kissed him, and that Xinxia had accepted his proposal. Xinxia was getting married, he repeatedly told Gu Jing, without growing tired of it, how happy Xinxia was after leaving them. He was punishing himself while also tormenting Gu Jing. Through the repeated heartache, Gu Jing finally understood how Xinxia had felt when facing Gu Shirbai. And he finally grasped why Xinxia had been so determined to abandon this son. He was just like him, a detestable demon. On the day he learned that Xinxia was getting married, Gu Jing almost went crazy. He desperately wanted to rush to her, grab her, and ask how she could get married, how she could fall in love with someone else, and whether she had forgotten about Wei Wei. But he held himself back and even sent a decent congratulatory gift, despite not being invited. When he learned that she was pregnant and had a daughter, although Gu Jing was heartbroken, he was no longer as agitated. On the contrary, Gu Shirbai threw a huge tantrum. But on that day on the rooftop of the 37th floor, after both father and son were stunned by the words "Stop making a scene" that blurted out, Gu Shirbai came down from the rooftop on his own and never mentioned wanting to see Xinxia again. They looked through Xinxia's Weibo together. A fan asked her why. After painting so many portraits of Wei Wei, she named her daughter Xiangyang instead of Wei Wei. She replied, "Wei Wei is Wei Wei, and Xiangyang is Xiangyang." Others might not understand, but Gu Jing and Gu Shirbai did. Xiangyang was not a substitute for Wei Wei, nor was she there to fill the void left by Wei Wei. Xinxia was a great mother, and she had never shown favoritism to any child. Later, Gu Jing invested half of his fortune in charity and established a children's cardiovascular disease charity foundation. As Gu Shirbai grew older, he often reminisced about his despicable self in the dream of the previous life. In fact, although he liked video games and Zhou Tian, who could design games, he had never really wanted Zhou Tian to be his mother. At first, he just wanted to use this way to rebel against Xinxia's control over him. Later, he simply hated that most of Xinxia's attention was taken up by Gu Shirwei. He was afraid that Xinxia would really stop loving him once she had a daughter. Just as others had said, the 11-year-old him in the previous life probably knew that his actions of deliberately provoking Xinxia and Wei Wei were wrong, and he didn't really want them to die. But once malicious words became a habit, they just slipped out. So he became very silent. Half a year after settling in the coastal town, I received a call from Gu Jing, asking me why. Both he and Gu Shirbai were trying to atone for their sins in their own ways. Many years later, Gu Shirbai finally became a qualified pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon. He almost lived in the hospital every day, either examining patients or performing surgeries. He exhausted himself desperately, as if only by curing more children could he wash away the guilt in his heart. Later, He met a 5-year-old girl. She was beautiful and well-behaved. And she had the same congenital heart disease as Weiwei. Gu Shirbai was her chief surgeon. The day of the surgery was the girl's birthday. The operation lasted 20 hours and was a complete success. Gu Shirbai walked out of the operating room with a smile, utterly exhausted, and then collapsed. He suffered cardiac arrest and passed away with a smile on his face.